We have to see this through to the end. You know, I'm a fighter. And this fight is the fight before us, because we could do all the tax cuts in the world. We could close the border for a while. We could do all these amazing things, which President Trump is doing. He's absolutely correct. He's on a roll. He's the hottest any president's ever been. We're doing it. However, if we don't get into what really tries to control the country, the deep state, and take it apart, and by the way, if we got rid of, I don't know, 100,000 or 200,000 billets and people, we'd have control of this. And I mean, cut the FBI by half, cut the CIA by half, cut 3/4 of the State Department, right? Cut the Defense Department by a third. Cut every department and start cutting them in half.
I will be your shield in the fiercest battle. I'll defend you from all these arrows, and the sword I wield will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield.
Royce White is speaking truth to power.
We will not give up a single right guaranteed under the Constitution.
You know I'm always going to talk about the real things. Okay. Free the Uyghurs.
If I'm going to die, I'll die now, right here fighting you.
Let me be your shield, let me be your shield.
What's wrong in this country is our sense of American citizenship is lost. It's lost in convenience.
Let me be your shield, let me be
Convenience will be the death of freedom. This is my show. And on my show, I control the conversation.
Good morning and welcome back to the Royce White Show here on Real America's Voice. David Penn here again, your guest host. Glad to be with you on this beautiful Saturday morning, the 19th of July. Started out with that fantastic clip from Steve Bannon, where he's talking about what really we're trying to do here. Our eye is on the prize. Getting back control of our country means cutting the size of government. And we don't have time for a scalpel. It's time for the broadsword. And people don't like it. I get it. They get concerned about the change. But we have a government full of people who are educated in our elite institutions. And those elite institutions have been turning out generation after generation of secular humanists going all the way back to the beginning of the progressive era. These people are acolytes of the New World Order. They are a scientific, technocratic class of people. They are anti-Christian. And how do we know that? From the policies that they pursue, from the way they act. For example, thou shalt not lie is the bedrock of republicanism, but it's okay to lie if you're in the intelligence community. Really? Do we want to live in that kind of a world? Or do we want the kind of radical transparency, the kind of honesty that could generate better well-being for each and every citizen of our republic? I don't want to live in a country where we lie. And that is really a critical problem now. It's a critical problem. And we see it with the Epstein files. I don't know how you felt about it. I mean, I was disappointed. I really was disappointed. I got just like many of us. I mean, we've been thinking about this for years, and what I want is a trial with dispositive evidence that reveals to the American people and to the world what I think I know from my own personal experience, that there are people that profit from the exploitation of children. I've seen it. I've been involved in experiences in my life where I couldn't avoid it. I've talked and known people who have been exploited in that way. I remember one person told me, this goes back all the way to 1992, that she was trained by the CIA. I said, what? What are you talking about? I thought it was an isolated group of craziness and crazies. And now I come to this point in my life, and this is all over the world perhaps, Well, I think it is. I want that to come out. And then, well, we saw what happened. But you know, when I think about it, we're in Spooksville now, right? How do we know what's real? How do we know what it is that we can really depend on? Man, and let me just show you a clip. Please play this next clip from MSNBC, please.
If you talk about this, I'm going to excommunicate you. Well, you're not the Pope, bro. I mean, you're not speaking from the throne ex cathedra. Anyone who disagrees with anything I say is banished. And I'm not saying Trump land is a cult. The Democrats are the cult of hating reason and logic and common sense. But when Trump starts behaving like that, it starts getting into cult territory.
Charlie Kirk, Benny Johnson, and there, Alex Jones. Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, joined the chorus as well, posting a lengthy statement on social media, pleading with the president to reconsider his stance on this case. Joe, so there you have it, some of the most...
Well, I don't know if you watch MSNBC. I know a lot of people don't like to watch it. I'm going to suggest you check it out. It would be called Opposition Research. And when I see on Morning Joe, they're actually featuring Alex Jones, who is persona non grata in that kind of media space, that they're using his words to undermine the MAGA movement. Whoa, I have to step back and say, wait a second now. Wait, what's going on here? Can I trust any of this? And I'm going to tell you, we live in the information age where we're supposed to have information. Ha, ha, ha. What can you really prove? What do you really know digitally online? Who can we trust? And so what motivated President Trump to take the actions that he took? I don't know, but I want to keep my eye on the prize. I don't want the movement to come apart at the seams when we're on the precipice of getting our game back together here by cutting the size of the government, by balancing the budget, by paying down the debt, by restoring the republic, by bringing back the jobs, by bringing back the well-being of the people, by putting first principles first. What do we really know? I'll tell you what I know. I know that when I go in my neighborhood and I door knock my neighbors and I go to organize my community and I meet people one-on-one to organize politics in my backyard, when I know people, when I talk to them, when I sit down, I can see when they're lying to me. I mean, not all the time. There's some very good liars, but most of the time, I'm a trained individual. I can feel it. I can sense it when there's lying in the house. And when I talk with someone directly, and I do it to organize my community, to find those unifying ideas that we all care about. Yeah, there's a lot of issues that divide us. Well, today we're going to start talking about the issues that unify us. And what are we willing to do to save this republic? Because quite clearly, this movement, you and me, us, we are taking on the deep state, because we have decided through evidence over time that they're just people that really have a one world governance outlook, and I don't want that. I want my country because of that founding document that identifies a creator that grants me unalienable rights. I do not want to live in a country where my rights come from other human beings. I can't strive for that, but I can strive to live up to that creator's natural rights, the self-governance that comes with being free. Oh, I like that. That's responsibility. You know, socialism is reducing personal responsibility. I don't want that. It's not that I want to be better than anybody else. I want to be better than who I was yesterday. That's what I want, and that comes with self-governance. It comes with honesty. So if we live in a society where we have this tremendous institution of spying and lying, how does that affect everybody else's well-being? No, I don't want it. I want that radical transparency. I want things to come to the light of day, like Justice Brandeis said, sunlight's the best disinfectant. I want to get to the truth of one institution after the other. And I'm asking you and me, all of us, to join your local Republican Party. If you're in Minnesota, I'll help you do it. You can find me. It's not a secret society, although they try to make it that way. We want to come into these parties, and we want everyday American citizens, people of good values, people that tell the truth, people that are seeking unity, people that are seeking well-being, to come into the party. And I'm not here to tell you how to think. Come on in and vote. Self-govern. Because quite clearly, the current crew that's in there has not got the job done. If they were getting the job done, I could watch the football games on Sunday afternoons. I could relax myself. But when you are confronted with a moment where the Republic's future is at risk, what are you willing to do to save this country? Even if it's talking to your friends, your coworkers, your children, your parents, your neighbors. Be a force multiplier for truth. Study, learn, spread the truth. Study, learn, spread the truth. That's politics. That's what we're doing here at Free People Radio. I'm coming to you today from the belly of the beast here in Minneapolis, filling in for Royce White, your host. I'm so honored to be with you. I'm so happy to be with you. I'm so glad we have a weekend of rest and repose. Well, let's just stay tuned. We got some very important commercial message coming up, and I'll be right back with you after this break. Welcome back to the Royce White Show here on Real America's Voice. David Penn, your guest host. So glad to be with you once again. We are a community. We are people that want to preserve this republic. We are understanding how we could lose our freedom. I want to stay focused on what's really important. There's nothing more important than wars and rumors of war. MAGA. Now, of course, we got a lot of different opinions in here, but basically, MAGA is anti-wars of, let's call it, discretion. And I'm just going to tell you, if you're wondering, hey, I'm trained, and if somebody comes in my house and I have to, I'll shoot them because that's self-defense. But I'm not going to break into my neighbor's house and go shoot them. That's murder. And we grew up, people particularly my age, we grew up in the world where the United States military was deployed all over the world with all kinds of involvements in Korea, Japan, Middle East, Israel, NATO, Europe. I mean, you name it, we're there. We're there. And we thought that, my generation, my cohort of boomers, we thought, hey, that's just the way the world is. And if you talk to a lot of people my age, they're going to tell you, hey, that's the way it is, even in our movement. But what we have to understand, and we have to study it, you have to see it for yourself. We, the people, have inherited after World War II the British Empire. That's why Putin calls us the Anglo-Saxons. It's a label, because we've thrown in with the British, and wherever we are, the problems that are there was caused by the British Empire. And I was preparing for my podcast next week, working on scripts this morning. What's more important next week? Boy, I had the whole thing ready, and it was going to be about the Middle East and everything going on over there. And then I thought, whoa, wait a second. Look what has happened in the Ukraine situation. Boy, have things popped off there just over the last few days. And as a believer in the peace and prosperity of the American people, it really concerns me what's going on. Let's listen to a clip once again from MSNBC. Thank you very much.
This week, President Trump issued a warning to Russia to, quote, reach a peace deal with Ukraine within 50 days or see severe tariffs levied on the country and all the nations that support it. That is getting bipartisan support, including from our next guest. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut is working with his Republican colleagues on a strong sanctions package against Russia. And he called the president's announcement a, quote, breakthrough step. And Senator Blumenthal joins us now. He's a member of the Homeland Security, Armed Services, and Judiciary Committees. It's good to have you back on the show. Tell us about this package and how far it goes.
The president's shift, Mika, is really a milestone change in his stance on Ukraine. As you well know, he has really operated as a sort of confidant and admirer of Vladimir Putin, and the Russian leader has played him and made a fool of our country as well as the President of the United States. And now, this week, he has said that he's going to sell arms to NATO, which then would transfer them to Ukraine. And equally important, he issued an ultimatum. 50 days, there has to be a deal to end the war, or he will impose 100% sanctions, including secondary sanctions, on anybody buying the Russian oil and gas, which mirrors the sanctions bill that Senator Graham and I have been working on for 2 years. It would impose 500% sanctions on India, China, Brazil, who are the major purchasers of oil or gas, not to raise revenue for the United States, not to reshore manufacturing, which are typically the reasons for these kinds of tariffs, but they are truly sanctions to change behavior and bring Putin to the table in a serious way.
Whoa, we got to think about this one. This is the next thing coming up on the horizon. That is very strange to see Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, confidant of Senator Lindsey Graham, these two neocon war hawks extraordinaire, going on MSNBC and actually praising, it felt like he was praising President Trump's change of heart about President Putin and the war in Ukraine. And we saw that President Trump is now starting to rearm, send more arms to the Ukraine, this time allegedly paid for by the European countries, although President Trump was very careful to say no long-range missiles. That means no attacks deep inside of the Russian heartland with U.S. supplied munitions. That's very interesting. But this sanction thing, because President Trump means what he says. But in this case, it's going to be a little different, or we're going to have a big, big trouble in 50 days. Because when you start talking about sanctions, secondary sanctions of 100%, that means that the countries that are buying Russian oil, that would be, for example, China, which buys about 45% of the Russian crude, India, about 35% of it, even Turkey gets in on 5% of that crude. Russia is exporting about 4.5 million barrels a day of oil. I mean, it's not a small business. It's a big business. So if you impose secondary sanctions against China and everything coming in as 100%, or India, everything coming in as 100% into our country, you're really, not only are you harming those countries, but our country is going to go into a tailspin, an economic tailspin. So if this was to go down as advertised, enjoy your next 50 days of summer, because the world will go to war soon thereafter. And why would I say that? Well, because we have the evidence of history. If history is any prediction of future outcomes, we know that World War II was triggered by the embargo of oil by the United States and Great Britain to Japan, and Japan was left without any oil resources. They had to go to war. So this is what we're going to do to the Chinese, right? We're going to cut them off from the oil, or do we just want to sell our oil to them? There's a lot of this I can't understand. There's a lot of it you can't understand. But if they just get cut off from oil and there's no oil, that's trouble at River City. So there's broad discretion in here. I think underneath this, I think President Trump still wants to bring this war to a conclusion. And I watched Sergei Lavrov, who just posted up a clip within the last 24 hours talking about that the United States understands the Russian position and listens to the Russians, where it is the Europeans who are completely uncompromising and unwilling to cut a deal that reflects the realities on the ground and the Russian perspective. And I think President Trump is called right there from Blumenthal, called him a Putin confidant. Because why? Because he talks to him, because he listens to him, because their concerns, the Russian concerns, are going to be part of a deal. Well, not if the Europeans are involved. And this goes back to, well, why are we in this country? Why is my family here? We ran away from Europe. We didn't like it there. Many of the people in this country, our ancestors, came to escape this great game of Europe. On the Professor Penn podcast, which you can find on all the platforms where you go to listen to podcasts, I like to say this frequently. The British attacked the Russians in 1805, right? 1812, the French attacked the Russians in Russia. Moscow got burnt down. 1853, the Crimean War, the British attacked again. 1917, at the time of the revolution, the Western powers occupied Russia, including 13,000 American troops in Vladivostok. 1942, Germany invaded Operation Barbarossa. Then we had the Cold War, and then we had this war. So, okay, are the Russians good guys? No, they've been doing the same kind of military interventions the whole time. They were active in war after war after war. this great game of the European monarchs is what it was. But we can't underestimate or leave out of the equation the West's continuous attacks on Russia. And people hear me say this, they get very mad at me. I'm not pro-Russian. In fact, my family left there because to stay there was to get raped and killed. So it's not like I have positive feelings about it. I want American foreign policy to be American. I want American deployments to be domestically, and I mean domestically protecting my country. I don't want to be involved, myself personally, speaking for myself. I'm not buying this thing that we got to be involved all over the world, protecting the British Empire. I just don't buy it. And I don't think that's MAGA. And I think President Trump is trying to extricate us, we the people, from this conflict by bringing about a peace. And we had in that cold open, Steve Bannon cut the Defense Department by 1/3. Hey, you know, that's a big deal to talk like that. That is putting all the chips up on the bar. So we got to watch this sanction thing, and please do not underestimate the power of your own voice. If you are a supporter of peace and a supporter of President Trump, let your feelings be known to everybody you know, and you have every right to get in touch with the White House. Let everybody know we want peace. Peace and prosperity for the American people. That is MAGA from my perspective. This is David Penn, your guest host. I'm enjoying being with you today. Please stay tuned for these commercial messages, and I'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to the Royce White Show here on Real America's Voice. David Payne, your guest host, asking the question today, what are you willing to do to save the Republic? In that last segment, we were talking about 50 days could be to chaos. Are you willing to talk to your friends, your family, your children, your parents, your co-workers, your neighbors about our desire for peace and prosperity? Are you willing to talk to pollsters about it? Are you willing to send emails to your elected representatives? Are you willing to do the work? Because, we got a president that listens. You can go on to the Professor Penn podcast on YouTube or Rumble or wherever you listen to podcasts. I had a very interesting conversation with noted pollster Richard Barris this past Thursday night. And Barris was very frank about saying that President Trump listens to we the people. And he said that's unlike a lot of previous presidents. He actually listens. So we have a chance to be in the game here. We're sitting at the table. I mean, our movement right now is governing. So why can't we all believe that our will, our human will, us, me, that I have a say in this thing if I just express myself? That's why I'm doing this with you. Let me just make this clear. I never thought I'd be doing this. I never thought I would be in media or in politics. I did it because I wanted to save my republic. I'm willing to do this because I love this country. I love it. I love the idea of a creator granting me unalienable rights. I don't want a government which expunges that idea. No, I don't want to be living in some kind of secular humanist prison, a digital prison. That's not me. So I was willing to do this. And if I'm willing to do this and start it pretty late in life, actually, with no aspirations for it, never, and then shazam, here I am. Well, that's because it's not my plan. When you give over to saving this republic, you're no longer doing your own plan. You've given over. In a great philosophical quote, if I am only for myself, what am I? What am I? What am I if I'm only about myself? So we have a chance to move forward in this country now. We have a chance to advance, to restore republicanism, and it's going to take a lot of work to do it. We got a long, long road ahead. And on August 1st, President Trump has signaled that he is going to increase the reciprocal tariffs that he told us about in April. And in April, the stock market went down like a rock because what he was saying was, hey, this post-World War II Democrat liberal order, which is heading towards one world governance, and how are we going to get there? The Trojan horse of one world economy. No, we're not going to do that. We're not doing that. We're going to make America rich and prosperous through tariffs. And everybody said, that's crazy. That's not going to work. Well, let me tell you, it's going to work just fine. It is working. In fact, the United States last month had a budget surplus because of a huge increase in tariff revenue. Now, let's talk about what this really means. Because, they're trying to scare me and scare you. And I say they, I mean the pundits. There's going to be inflation. And I talk about this on the Professor Penn podcast all the time. Inflation and prices are two different things, and let me share why that is. Inflation is related to the ever-expanding supply of money, which is associated with the Federal Reserve, which has an inflation target of 2% a year, which means if everything's good, we're losing 2% of value on the dollar every year. That's their goal, to make us poorer. And when the inflation gets higher, it's always because we're printing money to close the gap between the budget, the spend, and the income. The spend exceeds the income, and that's a baked-in problem for $1.5 trillion a year. So we're always expanding that money supply to make up that gap, not with creativity, not with hard work. No, with financialization, with the creation of debt, which makes us into debt slaves. Going back to that British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, that's the debt slavery part of the equation. Okay. when prices go up because of these tariffs, and they will, they're going to go up, and we're going to have a spike in inflation. And then the market is going to reset, and the inflation's going to stop. It's a one-time hit. Now, in the tire business, and I know a lot about this because, we have TireGet.com, and that's what we use to fund the operation share of Free People Radio. So if you do need tires, go to TireGet.com. We'd love to take care of you. We'd like to have you as a customer to fund this content. But we import, and we have to, because 75% of the tires that you use on your vehicles, they're not built here. Only 25% of the production of building consumer tires is done in the United States. Only 25%. And now President Trump has imposed a 25% tax on those tires. And guess what? When President Trump said Mexico is going to pay for it, China's going to pay for it, well, he's correct. He's correct, because there was huge discounts to offset that 25%. The price really only went up about 6%, but it could go up more in the future. One time when the market resets. It's not inflation, it's prices. And let's talk about prices. You buy tires once every 4 years. Please buy them from TireGet. But once every 4 years, if the tires go up a little bit in price, you're not even going to know it. You're not even going to remember what you paid for tires the last time, or any other hard good that's getting taxed like this. Why is President Trump doing this? Well, we the people passed, our elected representatives voted for, we the people. We have a new bill, the big beautiful bill. It's law now, law. And I'm going to tell you again, as a pundit, I'm not sure what the effect of this bill is going to be over 10 years. I can't tell. I read, but I don't trust. I don't trust what I read, because I don't know the people that wrote the score. And I know it's political. When somebody says it's not political, oh, it's political. When they say it's not, our local, school board race is not political, so there's no Democrats and Republicans. Come on. Polling. Richard Barris said on the podcast, he said, I'm upfront about what I believe, but I try to do my polling scientifically. Not like these other people who claim they're neutral and they're not. People lie to us all the time. So I can't tell what this big, beautiful bill is going to do over 10 years. But even if they're right, even if it's going to blow out another $3 trillion of deficit, this reciprocal tariff idea and these tariffs, they're going to generate billions and billions of new revenue. I think, this is my opinion, because I read the Federal Register and I'm watching what's going on, I think President Trump wants to collect about 25% tax on everything coming in, which in a good year is $4 trillion. That's $1 trillion. Let's say it's only 600 or 700 billion. So over 10 years, that's $6 or $7 trillion. So if we're going to lose $3 trillion or $4 trillion on the big, beautiful bill, if that's true, which I'm not sure, I got to say it over and over. What can we depend on? You can depend on talking to your neighbor. You can depend on joining your local Republican Party. You can depend on searching for truth yourself. But what we get on media, and I'm going to try to tell you the truth, because we're Free People Radio, we're searching for truth here. But I'm not afraid to tell you I'm not sure. And what are you going to do with that? But I'll tell you what I am sure of. We are going to collect a tremendous amount of new revenue from these tariffs. And I felt so bad about importing tires at one time. I shrunk it because I knew it was hurting my fellow citizens. But now I'm importing 25%, paying down that debt. Now I'm a tax collector. And for those of you that know the New Testament, hey, that's not always a bad thing, because now we're paying down that debt. We're balancing that budget. And why do you have to think about it in a new way? Because we're $37 trillion in debt. The bill's going to come due. We ran this debt up. I'm not going to blame my elected representatives. We didn't participate in the process. So we've elected people that sell us out. How do we change that? RoyceWhite.us. Let's get some real people into the process. Yeah, they might not wear, white starched shirts and American flag lapel pins, but those people, they've had us in an endless war my entire life. We need new people. We need them in every state. We need them in your state. What are you willing to do to save the republic? How are we willing to change our own lives? How are we willing to put down sin in our own lives? Because that separates us one from another. What can we do to form a community of people so we can talk to each other honestly, forthrightly, so we can stand on the truth, stand on something that's certain and sure? And that will be the human relationships that you forge in your neighborhood, in your family, to bring about a deeper understanding of what's going on in our country. We have to tell our fellow citizens that this is intended to balance the budget and to pay down the debt. And if we let another leftist into that White House, you know what they're going to do with all this new money? They're going to spend it. And we have to be politically active to protect our pocketbooks, because prices are not inflation. But you get another leftist in there, and they're going to take every last dime we have. And even if you're living in a $3 million paid-for house with $40 million in your 401k, they're going to take it from you, because that's their game. They don't want us free. They want us dependent on government. And that is not the way I want to live. Please stay tuned. Some commercial messages. I'll be right back very, very soon. Welcome back to the Royce White Show here on Real America's Voice. David Penn, glad to be your guest host this Saturday morning. This past Thursday night, I had a guest on the Professor Penn podcast, Richard Barris, who's a very noted pollster. And I'm going to ask if you could take the time, go to my YouTube channel, the Professor Penn podcast, and take an hour and a half and watch Richard Barris talk about the new right. It's very critical that we understand how things are changing. And this goes into, what are we willing to do to save this republic? Are we willing to change? Are we willing to study? Are we willing to grow? So it's the Professor Penn podcast on YouTube. If you like what you see, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We're on Rumble. Any place you go for podcasts, you're going to find it. You even find it on the War Room channel, because this was an epic podcast for me, and I'll tell you why. I'll share why. I've been striving with the Republican Party in Minnesota for several years. When I came into the party, I came in very naive. I just wanted to serve the party. I thought everybody was going to be a Republican like me. Boy, what a shock that was when I ran into Rhino Central. And I got pissed and I ran my mouth. And I'm saying it like that because it was unnecessary, because now everybody knows who I am. Well, that's my path, but it doesn't have to be yours. You join your party, you can just say, and how do you join your party? You find them on Facebook, you find them online. First thing you do is you go to your Secretary of State, and there's something called a precinct finder, and you find out where you are. Where are you politically? And once you know where you are, you find that local committee, and they'll have a email, way to communicate with them. You'll be able to track them down. And you just, when you finally get them on the phone, you say, hey, I'm a Republican and I want to elect Republicans. And that's really all you need to say. There's enough of us fighting this fight. We just need a couple 100,000 people from this audience to join the Republican Party in your backyard, so that we can, as part of this great effort to refresh the Republic, we need to get the MAGA movement in control of the Republican Party, and they're fighting it. Oh, they're fighting it here in Minnesota, tooth and nail. But I'm going to say to you, Minnesota Republicans who are watching this, go to my YouTube channel and watch this Barris interview, because Barris talks about the new right. And I've been talking to you people about this for 4 years. And people say to me, well, why do you back Royce White? Well, let me tell you the first reason why. He's a great politician. He's a great personality. He's a sensational thinker. I have to tell you, I'm here in Minnesota. I know all of you. None of you can even get in the ring with him intellectually. I'd like to see more people be able to do it. I'd like to have a higher quality of candidate that has a more intense and fine-tuned intellect, so we can get our way out of here, find a way out of this mess. But I back him because he's speaking to the new right. See, these people say all the time here, oh, he swears, I can't take... he's not electable. No, what you're saying is you don't want to elect him, and you're going to work against him like you did in 24. No, Royce is loved, okay? People love him. They love him outstate, and more people are discovering him in the urban core center. And how are they doing that? Well, first of all, he's a star in that culture, a star, a superstar. And he's coaching. When I'm showing up here, he's not missing these opportunities to be with you because he's just missing them. This man is working with youth, inner city youth, 14, 15-year-old kids, 16, 17, 18. He's coaching multiple teams. This is how we get out into the cities and develop a new political constituency. And you have to recognize what we're doing here at Free People Radio. And if you're in Tennessee or Florida, wherever you are, you got to find a way to do it yourselves in your backyard. We can't abandon millions of people to the ravages of communism. That's not Republican. Republicanism is, I will love my neighbor as I wish to be loved myself. Let's listen to Richard Barris talk about it with me on last Thursday night's podcast, please. For example, in the last cycle in 24, I wanted to go door knock in Minneapolis, right in the inner city. I can only get 4 people, me and 3 other people, to go into lit drop. We weren't even door knocking. We're just lit dropping. And Republicans would say to me, well, I'm not going there. Why not? Oh, I'm afraid. It's not safe. What do you mean it's not safe? It's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. No, I'm not doing it. So what I'm saying to you, Richard, is that the Republican Party of Minnesota, going back 30, 40 years, has absolutely abandoned millions of our fellow citizens to the depravity of a growing communism in the core cities. And I'm not willing to accept that. And that really underscores my support for Royce White. They don't recognize that he's building a political constituency using the culture. He's part of that culture. He's criticized for that. But I'm just telling you that outreach, Free People Radio is deeply involved in trying to reach what I think is the low-hanging fruit, which is the obvious constituencies that are forming of people who understand that the Democrat promise was a scam.
I think a lot of Republicans who have been part of the party for a while might be surprised to find out that a lot of the issues that motivate the new right, and especially the younger right, are the same issues that motivate people in inner city America and in urban America. And I want to say this before we actually get into specific issues. I wanted to just briefly mention that I have been arguing for whatever you want to call it, bridging the urban-rural divide through these issues for years, because for years, decades now, it's been American politics and electoral politics been a fight between, you have your rural coalitions and you have your urban coalitions, and then they're fighting over the suburbs to see who can win enough, to carry the day. And it leaves the suburb as the most important voting block, basically, because you figure the rurals are going to vote how they're going to vote. The urban voters are going to vote how they're going to vote. So everybody focuses on the suburbs. And there's a couple of problems with that. First and foremost, that the suburbs actually have unique issues, or unique perspective that allows, like, when you're focusing and you're tailoring your message to them, you can leave out large numbers of people in urban and rural America. So it's not healthy for our politics to do this. And then secondly, if we did begin to narrow the gap between urban and rural America, it just makes for a more unifying society, right? We're not going to be so polarized and balkanized. So it's not only a good political strategy, it's good politics in the sense that it will lead to a more stable society.
What an eloquent idea. It's not only good politics, it's good for our society. I'm in a political party. We're all focused on where I live, CD3. That is the home of the silk-stocking Republicans, the old guard, the rhinos. Well, let me tell you, we'd like as many of you folks to unify with us. If you're willing to do it, what are you willing to do to save your republic? Are you willing to change? Or are you going to sit there? I don't want to be rude about it, but change is what politics is all about. We're about change in this country. And what Richard Barris is talking about is the commonality of the rural constituent and the urban constituent. We're going to find unifying ideas. For example, Royce White is talking about no property taxes. People's heads are going to blow off their shoulders. Oh, how are we going to fund the schools? Hey, we'll find a way. You know, I'm retirement age. Let's say I owned a house. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to keep it if I didn't have income because I didn't have to pay tax? You know, let me free the British business model, at least at the end of my life. Come on. So this idea of changing, MAGA changing this political program where we're focused on the suburbs to the detriment of the urban and the rural. No, urban and rural is going to band together now. And if you're listening to me, let's go look at this podcast on YouTube. Please, let's think about the change. What are we willing to do to save the republic? Are we willing to change? Or are we going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, Minnesota Republican leaders? Because that's what we've been doing my entire life. My entire life, you've been doing the same thing, and the state just keeps getting more and more communist, more and more leftist. Nah, we need a new strategy. We got to have a brand new bag. We got to think through what we're doing here. We got to think through who the constituents are. Who are the customers that we're trying to sell to? I mean, come on. If we don't make this change, if we allow the separation to continue, the separation on policy, and also the separation of sin. What can I do? What can you do? Sin means separation. Sin means separation. You sin in private. It breaks you away from your family, from your neighbors, from your friends. Are we willing to change? What are we willing to do to change the republic? Are we willing to make personal changes in how we act, how we think? Are we willing to evolve our politics, to have the courage to go into the inner city? And it's not just Minneapolis, it's every inner city. And what we fail to understand is the Democrat just spreads that inner city out, that dependency out, with light rail, with programs, with Section 8 housing, with unrestricted illegal immigration that repositions people right next to me, right next to my house. I got this issue going on. So I'm motivated. You can find me at Prof. Penn Podcast on X. Please follow me. Please follow me on Getter. Please follow the podcast. Please find Royce White's Please Call Me Crazy. Please find Hebrews. We are a community of people that have come together at this special time in American history. What are we willing to do to save this republic? It's not just about sitting on the couch, although studying and listening and reading, that's the first step. But now we all know what the problems are. Now is the time to get engaged. Now is the time to make a move. It's now or never. So let's get going, people. I'm so glad to be with you. Please accept my thanks. Please stay tuned. Here comes the great Steve Bannon.
On the lawsuit filed, which just happened, It's kind of wild to me he's suing Murdoch. It's kind of wild to me Murdoch did not kill this story. What is your reaction?
Well, my first reaction is we are definitely living in the upside down, because somehow I'm in the same boat as Rupert Murdoch. And that is just an example of how wild everything is. The bigger point, though, and I think it's to show how wild the lawsuit is that, he's running the same playbook that he's run against ABC and CBS and hoping that it'll have a similar effect. But beyond that, it's very precise, because as you noted, he's suing Rupert Murdoch personally. But you know who he's not suing? Lachlan Murdoch, who's actually the chairperson of News Corp and Fox, who's actually the decision maker. Rupert Murdoch has no official role there anymore. He's an advisor. So I thought that was revealing in a lot of ways, because it isn't just about going after the entity. It's sort of this expansion spillover, trying to send as much of a message as you possibly can. He's sort of hitting every potential lever, not just against Murdoch and that empire, but then all the other media properties in the future. It's also about sending an example.
Last night, they tried to actually destroy him with what looks like a phony and fake letter. President Trump has put him on blast, put Murdoch on blast, particularly, as I have long recommended. Those clips right there are over a number of years. And who had the stones to stand up to Murdoch? So most of these guys are still sucking up to Fox and sucking up to the Wall Street Journal. Quite frankly, the Murdochs concocted something last night and thought it'd be a kill shot on President Trump. And lo and behold, it's the exact opposite, because President Trump is now on offense of what we said should be done.
Steve Bannon's thoughts on this lawsuit, and this comes, I should note, as the Attorney General is asking a judge here in New York to unseal portions of the grand jury material in the Epstein case. In this court filing today from the Justice Department, they say that public pressure is the reason they're doing this. They write, quote, given the public interest in the investigative work conducted by the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation into Epstein, the Department of Justice moves the court to unseal the underlying grand jury transcripts in United States versus Epstein, subject to appropriate redactions of victim-related and other personal identifying information. Now, as litigious as Donald Trump's history is, when we look at this tonight and what the DOJ is asking a court in New York here for and waiting to see what that looks like, but also this lawsuit and the step of a sitting president suing a news outlet, it marks a significant shift in his push to silence criticism about this lawsuit.
Yeah, this is the first response to the lawsuit from the Wall Street Journal. A spokesperson for Dow Jones, the owner of the Journal, says the following: we have full confidence in the rigor and accuracy of our reporting and will vigorously defend against any lawsuit. That's to be expected, but it's also important to hear. The Wall Street Journal is prepared for this. They're not surprised about this lawsuit, and there's no indication they're going to fold anytime soon.
Thank you so much. And thanks for focusing on this issue that these documents have really brought to the forefront, because it's one that doesn't just affect Democrats or Republicans. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue with such significant impact that it should concern every American, because it has to do with the fabric and integrity of our democratic republic. That we had a situation here where in the months leading up to the 2016 election, the intelligence community assessed, and this is what the documents detail, the intelligence community assessed essentially Russia doesn't have the tools, the capability, or the intent to try to change the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. Donald Trump pulls off a historic victory against Hillary Clinton in November of 2016. Even in the days after that election, the intelligence community continued their consistent assessment that reflected the same thing in the months leading up to the election. All of a sudden, in the early days of December, there was a president's daily brief that was drafted. This is put together by the different elements of the intelligence community that reflected that same assessment. Russia did not try to hack the election, in essence. That PDB, that document, was pulled hours before it was supposed to be published for the president to see that following morning. That document was never published until we released it yesterday. One day later, President Obama calls a meeting of his National Security Council, his top officials, to be held on what they called a sensitive topic. And the results of that meeting, which we released yesterday, and these over 100 documents that talk about in detail how President Obama and his team, he directed a manufactured piece of intelligence that detailed not if, but how Russia tried to influence the outcome of the United States election that President Trump won in November of 2016. This document was then used as the foundation for everything that came next. It was essentially a years-long coup that was launched against President Trump before he even had the opportunity to take his oath of office and be sworn in as President of the United States. So, as you know, there was a Mueller investigation that went on for years, cost taxpayers nearly $40 million. There were 2 congressional impeachments. President Trump and almost every member of his family were smeared and attacked, faced lawsuits, depositions. High-level officials were investigated. Some were arrested and put in jail. The list goes on and on about the ramifications of this, but foundational to it all was the fact that we had in President Obama and his leadership team, people who did not want to accept the will of the American people in electing Donald Trump in 2016, and therefore cooked up this treasonous conspiracy to, again, try to effectively, and they did effectively, launch a years-long coup against the sitting president of the United States.
Can we go to him, or he's not? Okay, we're so packed today that we don't even have time for our long open. It is Saturday, 19 July, year of our Lord 2025. Yesterday, a historic day. President Trump finally goes on offense against the Murdochs with the $10 billion lawsuit. The Murdochs retort, hey, the reporting's all accurate. We'll stand our ground. Pam Bondi finally goes into court, asks for the unsealing of evidence and grand jury testimony in evidence in the Epstein and Maxwell, both situations, and the bombshell of bombshells that General Flynn, who joins us in a few minutes, has said we get the bombshell about Obama. I've got Natalie Winters is the co-host this morning. Jack Posobiec with us, General Flynn. Let's start with Jack. Jack, right there you heard Tulsi. She went on Fox and Friends this morning for the opening salvo after the dump yesterday. Put it in perspective for us.
Steve, my phone was ringing off the hook all last night. Current and former serving people I knew who in the intelligence community, battle buddies of mine, calling up saying this is the biggest intelligence scandal since Iraq WMDs. This is far beyond anything Watergate was claimed to have been. They didn't have intelligence that they were protecting. They lied about the fact that the intelligence wasn't there, and they manufactured it on purpose. One of those officials, or one of those people, said to me, doors should be getting kicked in over this. This is like something that we would have seen at the end of the Soviet Union when everything was falling apart and they're taking pot shots at their own parliament building with tanks rolling through Moscow and the KGB is trying to take over. Look, what you're seeing here is no less than a preemptive coup by the intelligence state and elements of the previous administration completely directed down. And what DNI Gabbard said there was so clear. And by the way, the team that put this together, having every single document released in the annex here, the declassifications, the way they were able to do this, it's impeccable. Her team deserves absolute full credit for this over at the ODNI's office, Joe Kent there, and the rest. But what's very, very important to understand, Steve, and you and I said this in real time as we were going over the documents in front of a camera, as people said, Posobiec, why are you looking down so much? Because we're reading the documents here in real time. The decision to withdraw the president's daily brief on December 8th of 2016 is not a decision taken lightly, and there's only one official in the federal government who has full authority to do that. That's the president of the United States. Steve, this is unprecedented. This is like saying the New York Times isn't going to publish or the Wall Street Journal isn't going to just put out an issue that day. They pulled the entire thing. And why did they do this? Because that document is receiving wide circulation. And Steve, you mentioned it because as a member of the transition team, you knew that the president-elect is also someone who would have had access to this. Yeah. They would have been on the distro list for it. And so they pulled the entire thing to ensure that President Trump and his transition team, which of course at the time included the incoming National Security Advisor, General Flynn, never would have seen the original assessment that Russia did not attempt to hack the 2016 election. Think about how many lives have been ruined in the wake of that statement.
Yep. No, the whole arc of history, the situation with the Chinese Communist Party, where now Russia's their strategic ally. Hang on one second, Natalie. Hang on. Let's get General Flynn, because he's got limited time. General Flynn, it now becomes clear, more clear, why they had to take you out originally. As you know, the PDB went to we got the president's PDB as president-elect. It was President Trump, VP Pence, elect Pence, you, myself, Reince, Jared, just a handful of people. And we always question the fact, why did they jump to this conclusion when there was no evidence? This is why we set the meeting up for January 3rd. General Flynn, is very clear this is why they had to remove you immediately, sir. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, first of all, my hat's off to Tulsi Gabbard. I think Tulsi Gabbard just demonstrated a level, as I said this morning, of courage, commitment to being just absolutely transparent, which is what this administration has said from the beginning, and just getting to the truth. This very important meeting, it looks like, on December 8th is really the piece of data that I think has now been exposed to really allow everybody to connect the dots. As I said early this morning on my X post, basically I laid back out the plan, which was 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary, and Steve, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. And so once, enter summer of 2015 and so on and so forth, and Donald J. Trump wins the election, as you well know, in November of 2016, then, all the gates of hell were unleashed by Obama. And that's what we now know. Now, it's not just Obama. Of course, it goes back to the summer of 2016. And actually, what we're learning from this is actually goes back to late 2015, probably December 2015 timeframe. So what I want people to know from this is that there are going to be other names that have never been really exposed, people over at the National Security Agency, others inside of the FBI, others in the CIA that are going to be in big trouble here, because now that we know where it began, and it really did begin with the direction and intention of Barack Obama, that is going to open up so much more evidence. And as I know Tulsi has been doing for a number of months now, they've been culling through all this evidence. And that's why you saw recently the open investigation on Comey and Brennan. That's just the first shot across the bow for what I'm calling you can call it a counterpunch or you can call it a counteroffensive. But President Trump, you got to believe he's fully aware of all this. This is why, I think the last few days and maybe weeks, you've seen a level of frustration. And it doesn't mean that, everybody's off the hook on some of the other issues that we're dealing with. But this is the biggest crime in the history of the United States of America. As I said, I think it was yesterday, Steve, that, this is a moment that is really surreal for many people in the U.S. that never felt like we would ever go through or experience a coup. Basically, a coup which would take down a duly elected president of the United States by another individual. Now, I will tell you, and I've said this very publicly, if you're going to stage a coup, you better kill the king. And in this case, they were not able to kill the king, meaning, Donald Trump. And I'm just metaphorically using that because he's not a king. He's the president of the United States, but twice. We have seen twice assassination attempts on him, very public assassination attempts on him. Many people don't know of the other threats against his life. So they were not able to do that. They also, in my case, and I'll speak specifically from me, I went through hell, my family went through hell, but they picked the wrong Irishman and they picked the wrong Irish family, because we knew from the very beginning, and Steve, I don't think we realized when we were first in the White House in the early days of 2017, just how deep these people and how much they were willing to go. And now what we're learning, and I've known this. I've just written just published a book on it called Pardon of Innocence, because Trump had to use his pardon power to pardon an innocent man. Most people think I spent time in jail and was convicted. And, my case was dismissed because of egregious government misconduct. So we now, do I feel vindicated? I will feel vindicated when I see Barack Obama get, have
Amen.
Handcuffs on, being escorted from his house and being brought into jail. I would say right now, if I were in the Department of Justice, or if I was in the White House, I would demand that the Attorney General immediately take away the passports from these individuals who we know have already been named. And there's some others that have not been named yet. Take away the passports. Do not allow them to leave this country, because I guarantee they're waking up, this morning saying, where can I go? We got to get the hell out of here, because they committed a massive, massive conspiracy to undermine and overthrow the United States of America, the United States government, the President of the United States, and the presidency. And they left a wake in their path that is unprecedented, as Jack, as Pozo just highlighted. I mean, this is so bad. And anyway, what I want to do is I want people to understand that, look, I'm not giving up. We have got now to seek justice. And our rule of law system, Steve, has got to kick in.
No. We're on a three-prong attack here against the Murdochs on the civil charges, to release everything about the Epstein situation, and most importantly now is to get to the bottom of this, because the Epstein thing will fit into this with the intelligence services. This is why, folks, Tulsi Gabbard has been getting lit up over the last couple of weeks, kept out of meetings, because she was working on this with all the other intelligence. She was working on this, and there's certain elements, in particular, let me be blunt, the CIA today tried to thwart this. They tried to stop this. They tried to chop block this. I think it's one of the reasons they put out the great intelligence on Kennedy last week as another diversion play. That's very important, because that's the first coup. But this is a full-on coup. Mike, you've talked about the 16-year plan to take it down. But hang on one second. I want to play the second part of Tulsi's. I might, as we play this part, it shouldn't be lost on people. This should not be lost on people. The reason that Obama and Brennan and these guys wanted the coup is so we couldn't get into the information of what they've been doing as the deep state to drive us into war after war after war. That's why they did it. And no offense, in President Trump's first term, people like Bill Barr, people like John Ratcliffe at DNI, why was this not exposed in Trump's first term? We should have gotten this information in Trump's first term. Let's go ahead and play Tulsi's, the second part of her interview on Fox and Friends this morning.
I mean, this goes all the way to Barack Obama. Will we actually see someone as high up as Barack Obama take responsibility, be accountable, maybe face criminal charges? Is that a possibility here based on the documents that you've released?
Yeah, Rachel, the seriousness of, again, the implications and the consequences of these actions that were taken demand accountability. The American people not only deserve the truth and accountability, when we look at the future of our country as a democratic republic and the American people's ability to have faith that when they go and cast a vote at the ballot box, that the will of the people will be respected by those in government, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, this is literally what is at stake here. So we are referring all of our documents to the Department of Justice for the purpose of accountability and action. No one, no matter who they are, no matter how high up they are or how powerful they may be, no matter who the intelligence officials or professionals were who were a part of this treasonous conspiracy, there must be accountability. The truth must be shown to the American people in order to ensure that there is this faith and trust and integrity in our democratic republic for the sake of the future of our country.
So as voters, can we feel confident that we will actually see charges, do you think, out of this?
I'm not a lawyer. We're referring all of this to the Department of Justice. I know that Attorney General Pam Bondi is committed to bringing about justice to those who have broken the law. And in this case, again, what these documents detail, to me, in my view, cannot be explained as anything but a treasonous conspiracy. This is not so different from what we saw under George W. Bush, when we saw that manufactured intelligence claiming there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that kicked off a war that changed our country, that changed the lives of so many people like myself who went and served in those wars. The implications of manufactured intelligence are real. I would even say that what we are seeing here has an even greater impact than what we've seen in the past, because it speaks again to the foundation of our Constitution and our democratic republic, which is why accountability is so critical.
Mike Flynn, General Flynn, seditious conspiracy, treasonous conspiracy. Now you know why Barack Obama, when President Trump went down with Jared and had that meeting 2 days after he was elected in 2016, the only recommendation that Barack Obama made to the President of the United States is you cannot hire Mike Flynn. You cannot hire Mike Flynn. And the reason was that you knew, having been head of DIA and now going to be the National Security Advisor, you would know exactly where to go to unearth this. And this is why, one, they started this process of a coup, and number two, they could not have you in the White House in that position, sir.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, again, Tulsi Gabbard just demonstrated to the world how strong and how courageous she actually, she is. If anybody had any doubts about Tulsi Gabbard, those doubts need to be erased. The second thing, Steve, and this is a little bit more philosophical, but I actually believe that now, and I maybe it's my own faith and my own, trying to resolve what did occur. I actually believe that the United States of America needed to go through this, because we're at our 250th year mark. And for us to survive another 250 years, the American people, particularly the American people, needed to have us go through this. I hate to be at the fulcrum of it, and same with Trump. I know he didn't want to be there either. You too, Steve, and others, Peter Navarro, another one. There's other people that got hurt by this, Roger Stone. So all I'm saying is I do believe, and I've had to kind of come to grips with this, that I believe that our country, our nation, if we're going to continue to be a beautiful constitutional republic that we are for another 250 years, we needed to go through this pain. And we needed to demonstrate to the American people that there is evil in the world. There's definitely evil right here in our country. So I really believe now, looking back, and again, I to a bit tongue-in-cheek, I say they picked the wrong Irishman, and they did, because I think that had they gone after somebody else or allowed somebody else to be in a position, maybe that person wouldn't have been strong enough to be able to withstand the body blows that I know that I took, and certainly Donald Trump as well, because I don't want to discount what he and his family have experienced, nor do I want to ever discount what my family and I have experienced. But I do believe that there is some faith-based reason, and maybe it is. Maybe it's one of those sort of God knows, but our nation needed to go through this, and now we know, and we are going to recover. So the action, the sort of the action plan coming out of here, Steve, is pay attention, focus on what we need to be doing. So we have to stay heavily involved.
Hang on. We're only going to hang on, but we're only going to recover. We have to take this to its ultimate conclusion. The only way we're going to recover is you have to identify everyone associated with this. You have to get all the facts on the table. It has to be adjudicated. They have to be held responsible. And I think the charge here is going to be treason. Right? This is treason. This is a coup. Yeah. And so this is just the beginning. Tulsi Gabbard's courage and the people around her, their courage, because there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of blowback of them releasing this. We have to have their back, and we have to drive this forward. Mike, I know you're packed, but we're going to have you on next week. Just give it to, we're putting the tweet up now. Obama's 16-year plan to take down the nation. We want to address that with you on Monday on the show. But this all fits in to what Obama's strategy was, correct?
Absolutely. I want people to look at that tweet that I put out this morning. It's the plan, the strategy, the target, and the counterpunch, right? That's where we are at right now. We're at the counterpunch phase. But, Steve, as you just said, now it's we're going to step into the world of the rule of law phase. And we can't have it go too long here, right? We don't. It's not like we got to go search for evidence. We have the evidence. Now there's got to be some decisions and people that are going to be caught now.
Yeah. Yeah, but hang on. As you know, the first issue with the intelligence, it's a wilderness of mirrors. We're going to get chop block 1,000 times, and going forward, they're going to say, no, you don't understand. This is what it was. It's very clear if you understand what's going on. But they're going to fight, and they're particularly going to fight, and the part of the battleground is the American people that are still asleep. They're going to say, oh, this is the craziest wing of the craziest political movement ever. This is a conspiracy theory, guys. This is the Q crowd, right? This is all of it. These people are nuts, and none of this is true. We're going to have a fight. This is going to be, because this is, if you get this done right, you break their control. This is about who controls this nation. We had an elected president of the United States and Donald Trump, and they said, impossible. We cannot have that guy take office here because he'll unearth all of our crimes and send us all to prison back in 17, 18, and 19. And they couldn't do it. And so they had a conspiracy to have a coup d'etat, which is a seditious conspiracy, a grand conspiracy, or a treasonous conspiracy. This is when the fight starts. Mike, we're putting up your tweet right now. We'll get you back on Monday to go in detail. Where do people get you over the weekend? Because I assume this is going to be on fire, sir.
Yeah, at Jen Flynn on X, and I cross-post on all my other platforms, or they can go to generalflynn.com too, but I need everybody to start paying attention here. You know, one of the things that you just said, and I'll say it again, Tulsi Gabbard gets a lot of credit, and she comes from a completely different angle when it comes into being the director of national intelligence. So there's not a lot of accusations that they can leverage against her, but boy, they're going to go after her hard. And the second thing is, in counteroffensive operations, there's a lot of trickery and a lot of deception, and we have got to be ready for that. So, Steve, pay attention to this channel, everybody, and I'll get back on with you. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Mike Flynn, if Grace and Mo can push that out, the strategy of the 16-year strategy of Obama to destroy the country, and they came very close to doing it. Now it's incumbent upon us to stop. General Flynn, honored to have you on here, sir.
God bless, Steve.
Poso. God bless you, sir. One tough Mick right there. Jack Posobiec, the wilderness of mirrors, counterintelligence, Angleton. And folks, if you think this is going to be straightforward, you're going to see evidence that's going to blow your head up. And you're going to have people come up and look into the camera and bald-faced lie, just like we got that clip yesterday that Natalie got us on Ben Rhodes. They will look you in the eye and they will lie. That's what they're trained to do. We're going to the heart of the beast. This is the heart of the beast. And they will do anything to keep their power and still destroy Trump and the Trump movement, sir.
Well, Steve, that's exactly right. And what this does is it shows us that these intelligence officials are willing to lie. And by the way, Steve, this is prior to Signal. This is a decade ago, right? This is 2016. So there's no Signal. They wrote this is just what they have written in their government computers on email and in the meeting minutes that came out of that national security meeting. And you look at the absolute rogues gallery. Victoria Nuland sitting right there in that meeting. When you look at all of the Lisa Monaco sitting up there in that meeting, you're talking about the very people who have spent the last decade, number one, trying to destroy the American Patriot movement and the MAGA movement, and number two, trying to get us into a shooting war with Russia, trying to drive the United States and Russia into a shooting war together. It's very clear, by the way, that shooting war is currently being conducted on the territory of Ukraine. But make no mistake, this has been a fight between the U.S. and Russia. And Zelensky just extended the martial law over there. He's locking up people. Even the Financial Times, even the Kiev Independent is starting to turn against Zelensky, saying that he's authoritarian. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought Tucker Carlson was a foreign agent when he was saying that. But now you got the Ukrainians saying it themselves. The Financial Times is saying that, look, none of this had to happen. All of this was orchestrated, and it was orchestrated from the very top. You don't have to believe us anymore. You don't even have to believe Tulsi Gabbard because she provided their emails. We have it there in black and white.
The receipts.
This is the smoking gun the Patriots have been looking for a long, long time. And by the way, Steve, it represents an opportunity for President Trump. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has provided President Trump an opportunity to reset on the world stage and the domestic stage.
Amen. Amen. Historic. Short break. Poster's going to stay with us for a little while. I'm going to be here for a little while. Natalie Winters, our co-host this morning, riding shotgun, but she's taking over the reins here. And she's going to frame exactly where we stand with all this. A historic day yesterday, and now we're firing off the football here in the war room. Take your phone out. Text Bannon 989898. Get the ultimate guide that's free to investing in gold and precious metals in the age of Trump. Back in a moment.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
The lawsuit against in civil court against the Murdochs, the going to federal court to release the documents, or at least the grand jury documents in the evidence that's under seal, and Epstein, also the other evidence that could be the reason we say that this has to be dealt with by a special prosecutor. Release all of it as part of, because there's going to be a special prosecutor named on this. It has to be. This thing is so complicated. But you're seeing, and what you're going to see, is a coup against a president of the United States. And the question gets to be, hey, we took over and did beat it back. Why was this stuff not unveiled in President Trump's first term? That has to be a big part of this cover-up. Why was it not? And to say, well, the deep state ran things and people just had these political points, that's not good enough. It's not good enough because, folks, you talk about a grind. To get to the situation that we can put handcuffs on Brennan, handcuffs on Clapper, handcuffs on Kobe, handcuffs on Hill, handcuffs on Obama, and their staff, and Jake Sullivan and Ben Rhodes, all these guys, and perp walk them right into a court for an indictment, is going to be so hard. So many different times you're going to say, this is just too tough, we can't do it. We have to be forged in steel for this. to go through, and we're doing this for the country. This is not about MAGA. This is not about President Trump. This is not about this audience. This is about this republic. If we don't do this and do this now, we don't have a country. You'll be able to see who actually governs you, and it ain't you, and it's not your vote, okay? And it's not the people you put in office. It's an apparatus that has been formed over the last 60, 70, 80 years that controls this country and controls it in conjunctions with other countries and other intelligence services for their own betterment and for their plan, not what the American people are saying. And it's going to be quite obvious who looked the other way and who didn't have the guts and the courage and the focus and the fierceness to take this to its ultimate conclusion. Natalie Winters, can you frame this for us, ma'am?
Sure. Well, I remember, what was it, just a year ago when I was sitting here filling in for you, I said I think we would actually get retribution when you were providing live commentary of Hillary Clinton's trials and her ultimately going to prison. I think with the documents released yesterday, we can certainly broaden that out to include Obama, Brennan Clapper, et cetera, and hopefully we're one step closer. I think what DNI Gabbard did is sort of a representation of what people voted for when they were wanting radical transparency and accountability in the form of justice, right? We don't have to concoct charges or accusations against people. These are their own words. But I think you can sort of even draw the through line here. This is certainly the opening salvo, right, of what constitutes, I think, the deep state, the Russiagate hoax. But I think there's sort of an interesting evolution in their tactics to influence elections, right? You can tell from the timeline of events, right, their discussion about Russian interference, they did not think that President Trump was going to win, right? This was sort of a delayed after the fact CYA move. That's why you got that meeting, which I think it's worth listing off the names of participants, because so many of those people ended up in the highest levels within the Biden regime. But I think you see why they stole the 2020 election, right? They weren't content. They weren't secure with just letting the American people vote. There's a direct through line. They intensified their strategy to control the outcome because they didn't want to give President Trump a second term, and they weren't content just doing this sort of after the fact narrative management. And frankly, if you even continue that evolution to the 2024 election, they tried to make it so President Trump couldn't even run. Remember pulling off the ballots, obviously the lawsuits, the indictments, it goes on. And I think what you were sort of talking about, right, the who runs the country, who are these powerful people that you don't even know their names yet, I think there's a wonderful synergy there with everything that we've been calling for in terms of releasing the Epstein lists, not because it's a tabloid story, but because it runs to intelligence links, foreign and domestic. And when you read the names of the people who participated in this December 9th meeting to really set this whole thing into motion, I mean, the names: Victoria Nuland, John Kerry, Brian McKean, which I think is an important name. That's someone who you probably haven't heard of, but he was a very senior official in the State Department under Joe Biden. And in that sort of interregnum period before he joined back into federal government service, he was the senior director at the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement in D.C., right? The list goes on. Maher Bitar, James Clapper, McCabe, Brennan, Dunford, Lisa Monaco, Ben Rhodes, all of these people, and I guess not Ben Rhodes, but all of them who had very senior officials, right, powerful positions within the Biden regime, which it almost makes sense why they would be trying to secure a victory for him in 2020. So I think this is, like you said, the beginning, the opening salvo, but we need to keep pushing. And frankly, I think the most important thing that Gabbard put out in her tweet thread, which I hope materializes, certainly it's the documents itself, but it's these words: the integrity of our democratic republic demands that every person involved be investigated and brought to justice to prevent this from ever happening again. Frankly, if we continue to release stuff like this and there are no actual ramifications, you're only emboldening these people to do it again because they know they can get away with it.
Oh, no. It's over. Jack Posobiec, I know you got to bounce. I got to bounce. Closing thoughts, particularly to what she said, what Natalie said at the end. This is about now. Okay, Tulsi and the team at DNI have shown the courage to start to put this out against tremendous forces that tried to run her out of this government and try to destroy their integrity. Right? It's now. We have to pick up the ball and we have to drive this. This is one of the reasons I've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks, you need a special prosecutor. You need a hammer at the top that puts together a 200-man research team and prosecutors to go after this. If we don't do this, we don't deserve to be able to run this country, because they're in broad daylight telling you and laughing at you about what they did, sir.
Look, Steve, this is all about action at this point. The fact that it's been referred over to the Department of Justice, criminal prosecutions have to happen. Look, doors need to be kicked in over this type of thing. You have an entire generation of an intelligence community that was brought up now for the last decade plus believing that Russia hostilely activated and interfered in the U.S. the U.S. election of 2016. Never happened. So everything that has happened since then, up to and including the Ukraine war, goes back. We expelled Russian diplomats over this. We actively, the Obama administration, Vicki Nuland and all the rest up there, they actively committed hostile acts against a foreign power over this that drove us into this conflict inexorably. And it was done so with deliberate action. What Tulsi Gabbard has done here has provide all of us, number one, with a reset abroad for all of those foreign policy items that I just mentioned, but also domestically. The intelligence community needs to be broken up. The 16, 17 agencies, if you include the DNI, they need to be broken. They need to be reformed. The entire thing, you need to crack it, lance the boil, and fix what's going on. And it cannot be done from the bottom up. It has to be done with a hammer from the top down.
We need to purge.
It should have been done in the first.
These institutions.
It should have been done in the first.
The should have been done, but now it's got to be done. They have to be purged. We have to hit this with a blowtorch, and we have to have the courage to take this. This is why I say we need to have a special prosecutor. It's too much for DOJ, given everything they're doing and everything that they're fighting with the 175 lawsuits against the president as Article 2 powers. And I believe strongly using his Article 2 powers, the special prosecutor on this ought to report directly to the office of the president. Jack, before I let you go, social media, you're going to be up all weekend. We know tons of people in the intelligence community are reaching out to you. We'll have more on this, obviously, Monday and more in depth. What should people look for from you over the weekend as they go to your Twitter feed?
Well, Steve, we're up at Jack Posobiec, and of course, it's all about the president's daily brief. And people need to understand the PDB, even though it is on paper owned by the DNI, as all intelligence are by statute. In practice, that is a CIA product. So I just put this tweet up right now. Why didn't Mike Pompeo, who was the president's CIA director originally, who would have had access to all of this just weeks after the fact, go back, right? You had General Flynn there. Steve, you were part of the presidential transition team. Why didn't Mike Pompeo go and pull these emails in the first couple days he was there and say, Mr. President, they're all lying. All of this Russia stuff is a lie, and we could see it right here. Mike Pompeo had control of this information. Mike Pompeo owned this information. He had access to it. He never walked over to the president's Oval Office and said this. He never brought it to the White House. Why did we have to go and Kash Patel and the plot against the president and all the rest of it if it was sitting in Mike Pompeo's files? Sir, this is a huge problem, especially when Operation Spiderweb just happened. Who was in Odessa? Mike Pompeo again. This is what happens. Those guys get into these agencies, they go native, and they start deferring to the people who are there. God bless Tulsi Gabbard for having, God bless. It takes a woman, I guess, to have the stones to do what the guys won't do in this situation.
Unbelievable. Where they go for social media, you're going to be on fire all weekend, I can tell, until we get you back up Monday.
Yeah, we're up at Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily. We've got a couple of specials coming out. I may have to do an emergency special just on all this. It's too much, and the phone's ringing off the hook. Let us know, and we'll promote that. We'll stream it on War Room. We'll do everything. Just let me know. Keep me in the loop. Thank you. So watch for that. It's probably a special with Jack Posobiec. I may jump on there too. Natalie Winters, put in perspective also the other 2/3 of this, which is the president. Now Trump is in best. He's going on offense on the Epstein material with justice going to the courts, and he's going on offense against the Murdochs in a big way, ma'am.
Yeah, well, I think that the filings yesterday evening, there were motions to unseal the grand jury transcripts. There were two separate ones. One was for Maxwell, the other was for Epstein. They sort of lay out the case as to what they want, obviously, the transcripts. But I think the point to be made is that a lot of this information, the transcripts are just part of it, and you could probably get more information, particularly on the Intel and Intel link front, by declassifying the transcripts from Alex Acosta. But I do think that there was sort of a buried lead within both of those filings that in some ways I think there's an interesting synergy with what we saw go on with the Russiagate documents. It's because of this audience and their persistence and their really devotion to getting the truth out that there's any appetite to release this information in the first place. Subpoint 5 in both of these filings was, quote, public officials, lawmakers, pundits, and ordinary citizens remain deeply interested and concerned about the Epstein matter. Certainly not the corporate media, certainly not the Washington Post, which is busy laundering CIA talking points. In this case, I'll make sure after you leave, we're going to make famous the 3 WAPO journalists who were laundering the talking points as outlined in the Gabbard memo. But if it weren't for this audience, frankly, Steve, if it weren't for you, there would not have been the appetite, I think, to make the case for releasing it.
No, we're going to, you've also got Mike Benz, the great Mike Benz. And I'll tell you, Natalie's interviews with Benz are classics. So Mike Benz will be joining you, a lot going on.
I'm not suicidal.
Natalie, exactly. Natalie is not suicidal, on a roll. And the Benz stuff is just extraordinary. He's such a unique individual in this time and place to really be able to connect so many dots. I'll be up on Getter throughout the day. I want to make sure we thank our sponsors, particularly Birch Gold, End of the Dollar Empire. Now we're putting out the 8th free part of the 8th installments taught now in college courses in finance. If you want to understand the global economy, if you understand global capital markets, if you want to understand why gold has been a hedge of times of financial turbulence, why gold has outperformed even the S&P 500 in the first quarter of the 21st century, which is pretty extraordinary. Gold's not supposed to act like that. Go to birchgold.com/Bannon, End of the Dollar Empire. The most important thing there is not just to get the material, to make contact with Philip, Patrick, and the team that is out at Birch Gold. Short commercial break. Natalie Winters takes it from here. See, I'll be up on Getter all weekend. See you back here Monday morning.
is Barack Obama really?
He took us backwards. He didn't leave it better than he found it.
There's never been anything false about hope.
A stunning 30% decline in the net worth of black households in America under Obama.
About how America needs hope and change, like that crap, that didn't happen. And I'm still waiting for that.
Welcome back to the War Room. Yet another litany of reasons why Obama is probably one of the worst presidents in the history of the United States, not just in his actions while in office, but I think what we're learning, what he did to nullify and subvert President Trump and his administration, at least the first time around. But as always, the MAGA movement seems to prevail. All we need is some transparency to prove our theory of the case, not necessarily that we want to be vindicated. I'm also sure our next guest, Steve Cortez, probably didn't think when you were getting ready to put out that documentary, which I think is coming out Sunday, that it was going to happen amidst this news cycle. Quite clairvoyant on your part. Before we get into the documentary, some other stuff about amnesty, I'm just curious your thoughts generally on this kind of, I guess, yet again, proving Russiagate to be a complete and utter fabricated hoax.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll take the lucky break as far as the timing, right, that everyone is talking about Obama right now, and they should be, and my doc happens to be coming out tomorrow. But look, regarding what Tulsi Gabbard has revealed, we've known for a long time that Barack Obama was a charlatan and a liar. Well, we now know that he is, in fact, a criminal as well, and I think a criminal and traitor to this country at the very, very highest, most severe levels. And so much credit to Tulsi Gabbard for doing this, and to President Trump, by the way, for hiring her, and even more broadly than that, for building this coalition that involves so many people like her, former Democrats, who have come around to populism on the right. It's amazing what has been built in terms of that coalition. And now we're seeing some of the fruits of it, of let's start telling the truth, because it's important for Americans. You know, I think a lot of us suspected most of this, but now we're actually seeing it with proof, with evidence and documentation. And thankfully, I think we have the kind of DOJ now that is going to actually fully chase this down. So Barack Obama, nothing surprises me about him. As a Chicagoan, I've been watching him very closely for a very long time, which is a big reason that I did this documentary in Chicago. And as I said, he's done tremendous damage to this country. Most of it we already knew. Some of it now is truly new, revealing, shocking information. And thanks to Tulsi Gabbard and President Trump.
Well, I always say I think the distinguishing factor between the sort of old guard Republican Party and MAGA is what our definition of accountability looks like. I'm sure, Trey Gowdy and the Benghazi committee crew would think just releasing the documents, just, going on Fox, doing some nice talking points is enough. But this audience wants criminal prosecutions or at least trials for people who committed crimes. I'm curious, for people who would say, oh, why are you doing a documentary on Obama that's looking into the past, though I think as we've learned, looking back at the, even recent past is how you understand the future. What prompted you to want to make this documentary now?
It's a great question. I've gotten that from a lot of people. It's a natural question, right? Like, well, why now? He's been out of office for so long. And there were really two reasons. The first is, and this is the most important, is that last November, I think for the first time in his political career, at least his national political, net negative for the Democrats. In other words, he did not help Kamala Harris at all. I think you can make a strong argument that he actually hurt her. He was a scold. He was not helpful in the campaign trail. He really went after black men in a way that they certainly didn't appreciate and moved toward President Trump. So I think that's a very new phenomenon, that this man who has been canonized and sainted and just constantly adored by the corporate media is starting to show real political weakness for the first time in his life. So I think that's worth examining what's going on here. And then the second reason that's specific to Chicago, but I think anybody can appreciate this, is that he is building an absolutely gargantuan just testimony to megalomania, and that is the Obama Library. Natalie, you know that neighborhood extremely well, right next to the University of Chicago. Chicago is known, by the way, for architecture. This is the biggest, most hideous eyesore you could possibly think of. It is so utterly out of scale. It's almost $1 billion total cost. It was supposed to be $300 million, so more than 3 times the budget, 5 years late. In some ways, I think in sad, twisted ways, it's actually kind of representative and emblematic of who Obama actually is. So those two factors, though, were the impetuses for me doing this. Last November, the fact that he hurt the Democrats for the first time, and then this Obama Library, which, again, I think they will eventually rue the day that they built this thing, because it is so giant and ugly and expensive that it's it's embarrassing, frankly. And so I did a lot of the shooting in Chicago right there. And then I also I spoke to locals. I only interviewed Chicagoans, several of whom are black and had supported him and had been really excited about him when he was elected, like most people in Chicago were. I certainly wasn't, but most Chicagoans were. And then just how disappointed they've been, and disappointed on the merits, right? Not just in terms of substance and style, but on the merits. And they're particularly in two aspects. One is that he didn't deliver at all on prosperity to regular working people that he claimed to represent. In fact, he did exactly the opposite. So that's his first really awful legacy, is economic prosperity was only delivered to the tiniest slice of connected, credentialed cronies of his in the United States. And he's the opposite, in that way of what he claimed to be. And then the other aspect is, what has he done post-presidency, which we really get into. Never goes back to Chicago. You never see him doing public service. Instead, just lives a life of Martha's Vineyard and the jet set and Hollywood and Netflix and so forth. That is what he has chosen to do. And by the way, too, if I could add one third actually in, he's a man who, though he was the first black president of the United States, made race relations in America markedly worse. He took what was an amazing opportunity and a platform that really could have accelerated racial healing, which was already going on in a really substantial way in the United States when he was elected. And he reversed it. He literally took us in the opposite direction. He agitated, he divided at every turn. And I think that legacy matters for us still today. That's why it's worth examining. Who is Barack, really? Who is he? Let's expose him. And then in light of these new revelations from Tulsi Gabbard, perhaps even more important, to be honest about who Barack Obama is.
Yeah, and I think it also helps to undercut this whole new left-wing populist surge, right? The AOCs and the Bernies, the idea that they've helped the working class. They never could, because they can never touch what I guess is their equivalent of the third or maybe even fourth rail, which is immigration, particularly illegal immigration, because they're too, as you were just talking about, caught up in the sort of identity politics. I guess if you think the United States of America is stolen land, then it's going to be a little hard for you to support mass deportation. Steve, speaking of that, if you can hang with us through the break, I want to double down on the War Room's defense, not just of why we need all the Epstein documents and why we probably need at least some trials, probably criminal prosecutions for everyone involved in the Russiagate stuff, why we need to keep hammering Maria Salazar and all of these horrible open borders GOP rhino types who are trying to subvert MAGA. Yes, we got another, we'll call it instead of Russiagate, Amnestygate. Well, we don't want amnesty. We want big, beautiful walls and mass deportations, not just for criminals and not strategic. And we certainly don't want to allow illegal farm workers to stay here just because big business wants that. Not quite. We'll be right back after the short break. Steve Cortez, Mike Benz, Naomi Wolf.
This is the primal scream of a dying regime. Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
You're in the War Room. It's Saturday, 19 July in the year of our Lord 2025. Natalie Winters filling in for Stephen K. Bannon. We've got a packed show. Mike Benz, Norman Lawton, Dr. Naomi Wolf, and we're going to start off with Steve Cortez. Steve, before we let you bounce, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this renewed push. It seems like it never goes away. It's like the Hydra. Right. You cut it and it just keeps coming back in a different and frankly worse way. But the push for amnesty among the sort of establishment flanks of the GOP.
Right. Yeah, the establishment zombie in Washington, D.C. refuses to die. Right now, Maria Salazar is taking the lead Republican, supposedly Republican representative from Miami, somebody who is pushing hard a so-called Dignity Act. What it actually is amnesty light. Well, we don't want full amnesty. We don't want amnesty light. We don't want any talk about amnesty. And the American people spoke incredibly clearly on this issue last November. It was the signature foundational issue of Trump's 2024 campaign. He won every swing state. He won the national popular vote. In addition to that, by the way, I want to say this because I think it's important as an Hispanic, because Salazar's claiming to represent Hispanics in America. That is just not the case. Donald Trump did better among Hispanics than any Republican has ever done, again, with immigration as his signature issue, and he won Hispanic men nationally. I mean, even including places like California, won Hispanic men. So the people of any color, of any persuasion, of any ethnicity are clear that we want to defend our borders, that there's nothing xenophobic or bigoted at all about that. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite, protecting all of our people, whatever their backgrounds, and prioritizing our people and our workers. That is the imperative of the Trump administration. Now, he's already done it in terms of securing the border. It's amazing how fast he's moved to secure our border. The deportation part is more complicated, of course, and is unfolding. But I think it's important for all of us to continue to back him on this, to continue to back Tom Homan, and to totally reject these GOP corporatists who want us to take us back to a Jeb Bush era. We're not falling for Maria Salazar. You do not speak for your district. You don't speak for Hispanics. You certainly don't speak for the America First movement. We're not having this.
Yeah, she should be primaried at the very least. Frankly, I'd probably advocate for her being censored. It's so awful. Steve Cortez, if people want to get the documentary, I know you've been pumping out a lot of good content lately. Where can people go to follow you and watch it?
Yes, please. So it'll be out 6 p.m. tomorrow. You can see that trailer now, but the actual doc will be 6 p.m. Eastern time. CortezInvestigates.com is my website with all of my content. I'll also be streaming it on my social media, so I'll be putting it at that same time on Twitter. So, yeah, please have a look. It's 24 minutes long. I'm not asking for a huge commitment. I think you'll find it very, very revealing. You'll find these regular folks to be really compelling, and it's worth it just to see the footage of the library, because if you haven't seen it, you will be shocked at how hideous this thing is. So, yeah, please check it out tomorrow.
Thank you, sir, for joining us. We'll have you back on soon.
You bet. Thank you, Natalie.
I remember that was my, I think, freshman year at U Chicago. There was a lot of back and forth. It was funny watching all the woke students twist themselves into weird mental and ideological contortions to somehow justify the, as they would call it, gentrification of the, I guess, economically inequitable zones of the south side of Chicago, or whatever the appropriate phrase would be, to justify, essentially razing it to the ground, bulldozing it to set up the presidential library for their, man, myth, and legend, Barack Obama. I sat in many classes where we had to do debates about whether or not the library should be allowed to be built. You can probably imagine what side I took and why I never spent much time there, and instead decided to come and work at the War Room for Steve. Probably one of the best decisions, if not the best decision I have ever made. And speaking of good decisions, we've got some breaking news coming out of jointly the State Department and HHS. press, having to do with, I guess, another 3-letter organization that you hate. That's the WHO and their international health regulations. They want to control you and use public health, obviously, as a pretext to do so. We've got a clip that they sent to the show. They wanted us to play it, so let's roll that, and then we're going to have Norman Lawton and Dr. Naomi Wolf on to discuss this really big change. Let's roll it.
Hello, everyone. This is your HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I want to speak to you today about a controversial issue that could directly impact you and your family during a global health emergency. Last year, the World Health Organization's governing body made some far-reaching amendments to its international health regulations, otherwise known as the IHR regulations. These regulations establish the legal framework that gives countries rights and responsibilities for managing public health events with global impact. The deadline to reject these amendments is next week, and we are rejecting them. So I'd like to explain to you why. The first reason is national sovereignty. Nations who accept the new regulations are signing over their power in health emergencies to an unelected international organization that could order lockdowns, travel restrictions, or any other measures it sees fit. In fact, it doesn't even need to declare an emergency. Potential public health risks are enough for it to initiate action. If we're going to give the WHO that much power, we should at least invite a thorough public debate, especially since the agreement is an official treaty and it bypasses the U.S. Senate, which plays a key role in ensuring major international commitments receive proper democratic oversight. To make matters worse, the new regulations employ extremely broad language that gives the WHO unprecedented power. They require countries to establish systems of risk communication so that the WHO can implement unified public messaging globally. That opens the door to the kind of narrative management and propaganda and censorship that we saw during the COVID pandemic. We don't want to see that kind of system institutionalized even further. The agreement also contains provisions about global systems of health IDs, vaccine passports, and a centralized medical database. It lays the groundwork for global medical surveillance of every human being. Maybe if the WHO were an infallible authority, untainted by industry influence, we would consider accepting the new regulations. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic demonstrated otherwise. During COVID, the WHO failed to enforce the international health regulations that were already in place for generations. China withheld critical information about the outbreak for at least a month and faced no real consequences or criticism from WHO. As the 2024 Congressional Oversight Report put it, the WHO was misinformed, denied access to China, and used as a cover for the Chinese Communist Party's reckless action. These and other atrocities make one thing clear. We must strengthen national and local autonomy to hold global organizations in check and to restore a real balance of power. Underneath all the bureaucratic language, what's at stake here is a vision for our future. Are we going to be subjects to a technocratic control system that uses health risks and pandemic preparedness as a Trojan horse to curtail basic democratic freedoms? Do we want a future where every person, every movement, every transaction, and every human body is under surveillance at all times? Now, I don't want to be too alarmist. The new regulations aren't in themselves medical totalitarianism. In fact, they were perhaps written with good intentions, but they are definitely a step in the wrong direction. That's why we're rejecting the amendments, not only on behalf of our own citizens, but the whole world. After all, America could simply ignore the WHO. But few other countries are as powerful as the United States. Even though many of these amendments are phrased to be non-binding, as a practical matter, it's hard for many countries to resist them, especially when they are dependent on the WHO funding and its partnerships. That's why we're taking leadership to stop an agreement that's bad for the entire world. I want to be clear that in rejecting these amendments, President Trump and I are not rejecting international cooperation. we can cooperate with other nations without jeopardizing our civil liberties, without undermining our Constitution, and without ceding away America's treasured sovereignty. That's my commitment to you. That's President Trump's commitment to you. Thank you, and God bless you all, and God bless our country.
All about restoring sovereignty and not just outsourcing jobs and manufacturing to a bunch of other countries, I'm sure aided and abetted by the globalist economic models that are put out by the UN, the IMF, the WF, all of these horrible institutions. Frankly, I guess maybe we could throw the Fed in there, Jerome Powell. That's why, of course, you got to be checking out birchgold.com/Bannon, texting Bannon to 989898 and learn why gold has always been a hedge against all of these power plays, not just for your money, but for your own personal sovereignty. I want to bring on the one and only Norman Lawden to walk us through a lot of details in that video. Very comprehensive, diligent video. I'm curious if you can sort of translate it for us, what exactly this means and what we avoided.
Great to be with you, Natalie. First of all, I'd just like to say a huge kudos to the War Room Posse, to Steve as well, and yourself for bringing this and keeping this at the forefront, and just everybody who pushed back, James Roguski and all the other researcher and activists who have kept this, topic very much front and center. This announcement by Robert Kennedy Jr. Is a big win. We can be very happy about this. This is a great step, in the right direction. So everybody can be celebrating and having a sigh of relief there. That being said, I did want to mention once more, I spoke about it earlier in the week with Steve, but I wanted to mention this very particular executive order that was signed by President Trump on the 4th of February of this year, entitled withdrawing the U.S. from and ending funding to certain United Nations organizations and reviewing U.S. support to all international organizations. And in particular, in that EO, I would alert the posse to Section 3.B, which stipulates that there is a process, a 180-day process that the State Department is going to essentially take this time frame to review all of these treaties, conventions, and memberships to these organizations. And the deadline for this review coincides with, early August to be precise. And regarding the international health regulations, what was just rejected were the amendments to these regulations. The regulations themselves were adopted back in 1969, obviously in the dead of night without the American public being aware or informed about what these regulations entailed. And so what I'm hoping the Trump administration will take as a next step is withdrawing of these regulations in their entirety as an additional step to withdrawing from the WHO, which President Trump kickstarted at the very start of his term back in January.
Nora, if you can hang with us through the break, because I think the audience is probably next logical question. Obviously, it's not altruism that is motivating these IHRs or any of these public health, public safety measures. It's obviously about control. So I don't think just like our domestic deep state here, right, they're going to sit down and say, oh, well, okay, America, President Trump, you don't want to be a part of this. You don't want to be a part of the pandemic treaty. Have at it, right? Have at it. I'm curious your thoughts, how they're sort of going to reframe and reorient their strategy. So hang with us through the break so we can hit that. And Warren Posse, we always got to thank our sponsors. That is, of course, HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code Steve. Check out the $1 million Triple F protection. Give Natalie Dominguez, the team over there, a call. I think this show is quite illustrative of why we need you in the fight. The deep state does not rest. They're busy attacking President Trump, not even from day one of his first term, even prior to that, December of 2016. That's why you also got to be checking out, lastly, Tax Network USA. That's tnusa.com/Bannon, or you can call 1-800-958-1000 for a free consultation. We love our sponsors. It's how we can keep bringing this show to you. Make no mistake, this show, my phone, I guess Jack and Steve's phone, they blow up from IC guys. My phone just gets blown up by reporters supporters. Maybe that's indicative of what people think of us, but they're always asking me about you guys and the power of the posse. So we're very grateful that these sponsors allow us to keep our show going. We'll be right back.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We're still joined by Noor bin Ladin. Noor, picking up off of what I was sort of talking about before the break, from your sort of, I think, very well-informed, meta perspective on all of this, what do you think their next push is to sort of circumvent the Trump administration's efforts to nullify their authorities in the form of whether it's the pandemic treaties, just traditional WHO membership, or today, the latest, I guess, casualty, the IHR stuff?
I think it's very important that we remain vigilant on both fronts, on both the international globalist front when it comes to these organizations like the WHO, and on a local national level. So what I mean by that is that we really need to be paying attention in each of our nations about the legislations that our own government is pushing. So for example, in the case of Switzerland, they are pushing through legislation to be presented to the government and to the public next year in 2026, a law on epidemics, which essentially will put in the, measures and regulations that would completely block the population in the same way that we saw during COVID-19 and curtail our complete freedoms. And those laws actually on a national level tend to be even more stringent and restrictive than the WHO regulations, the IHR, or even the pandemic treaty. So that's also something that you need to be looking at in your own country, Natalie. But thankfully, it seems that the Trump administration understands very much what is at play when it comes to medical totalitarianism, as Secretary Kennedy referred to it in his video, and also just this global technocratic control system, again, taking Secretary Kennedy's words.
Norbin Laden, as always, I know the posse appreciates your analysis of this intentionally, I think, complex, because it's meant to deceive stuff. Before we have you back on, if people want to follow you, stay up to date, not just with your posts and your writings. I know you're a bit elusive, but hey, quality over quantity. Where can people go to follow you and stay up to date with everything you're working on?
Thank you, Natalie. Best place is norbinladen.substack.com, and stay tuned because James Roguski and I are going to be resuming our podcast on the WHO and this entire pandemic health emergency industrial complex that they are building out via the WHO and also all of our health departments in our different countries, obviously at the behest of Big Pharma, and that's a key topic that is not going to go away. Pharma and medical emergencies are very much being used as one of the key Trojan horses to bring about, the mass surveillance control system of the globalists.
Indeed. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. We'll have you back on.
Thank you, Natalie. Great being with you.
Likewise. Dr. Naomi Wolf joins us now. Now, Dr. Wolf, I want to hit the same topic because I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts, but I've also seen lately you have a lot of thoughts on the whole Epstein saga. You had a great Substack on it. I'd just be curious to get your thoughts. Frankly, it probably links to the WHO stuff in a weird roundabout way, but your just kind of general assessment of where we stand in that fight for transparency.
In the WHO fight, the announcement we just saw from Secretary Kennedy.
Before we get into that, just to start with the Epstein stuff, I'm curious.
Oh, sure. Well, to reprise what I shared with the posse when I was on with Steve Bannon, I did write an essay kind of trying to put the dilemma I think President Trump is in with releasing everything into a larger context that I understood from my past life, being represented by an agent who I discovered in 2019 had a huge, important intellectual salon with some of the key scientists in the world, and then drawing in at dinners some of the key technologists in the world, that was funded by Jeffrey Epstein. And Eric Weinstein, who used to be managing director of Thiel Capital and is a mathematician, Harvard-trained mathematician, gave a really important interview in which he basically said that he believed that the bigger picture of the Epstein story, or a parallel picture, right, is not just the very important story of retail clothing manufacturers and politicians abusing minors, right, as serious and important as that is. But there's also a story of a kind of engagement structure that was set up very deliberately at Harvard and elsewhere to lure and draw in and compromise both innocent and guilty scientists, some of the key, again, minds of our time, as well as both innocent and guilty technologists. And since I know he's right from my own knowledge of this network, I think it's important because some of those same people who are at those dinners, Edge Foundation dinners, funded by Jeffrey Epstein, are some of President Trump's key backers and supporters. So it's just in no way telling President Trump what I think he should do, or or that I know who Jeffrey Epstein is in terms of who's behind him. I don't. But I do think it's important for people to understand this bigger picture that there are innocent as well as guilty people likely in these files, and that I always want to trust the people that they have discernment. They can process that information and put it in context, but also there could be something much bigger going on than we even realize with the Epstein story, which is as Eric Weinstein put it, a direction of science, of management and control and hurting of science, because the scientists who were tapped by Epstein-funded entity and drawn together with technologists, created with technologists the dystopia that we're fighting right now. They're, what we reductively call transhumanism. It's consciousness manipulation. It's multiple dimensions. It's pre-AI and AI. It's surveillance technologies. It's propaganda techniques and human psychology. It's ritual, what makes us human, what makes us able to transcend humanity. It's genetics for sure, and the intervening in the human genome. So all of this world that we're struggling with right now was kind of drawn together by an Epstein-funded entity starting in the late 2010s and extending right up until probably 2018, 2019, until his death. So I shared that. And now, moving out from a bigger picture yet, I think this announcement from Secretary Kennedy comes at exactly the right time. And it's exactly the right kind of announcement, because the press has been so understandably critical, and the grassroots and posse and MAGA and MAHA reaction to the blundered messaging from the White House about the Epstein files has been so understandably hostile, that this kind of victory comes at a critical time. It's going to reminds me why I voted for the combination of MAHA and MAGA. It's exactly what we need to kind of remember that there are many fights, and that this is a huge fight that we just have delivered into our laps a major victory.
And just walk us through, sort of similar to what I was asking Noor, how you think they sort of recalibrate their strategy to achieve, whether it's the digital surveillance state, the sort of public health emergency nanny state, since the Trump administration, I think today's announcement as an example, has withdrawn in such a large capacity from a lot of these WHO, whether it's working groups, the organization itself, or just these weird, nebulous treaties.
When you say they, do you mean the White House, or do you mean our
the WHO?
Opponents? Okay. Wow. Well, I think that Ms. Bin Laden did an amazing job analyzing the nature of this victory, this huge announcement. I would just add to what she said, and then I promise I'll answer your question, that it's a victory on so many levels, domestically, right? She rightly put it in a global context, but it's a huge victory for us domestically, because those were the issues that President Trump campaigned on, and that Secretary Kennedy, RFK Jr., campaigned on: the surveillance state, the lockdowns, the mandates, the sovereignty itself, this theme of sovereignty. Do we get to decide what happens in the United States of America as a nation, or as our bodies, right? Our own bodies, our own public health decisions. Do we get to decide? And I wish that HHS had a better communications shop, because those incredibly important deliverables that go right to reminding people why they had hope for this administration, this alliance, are kind of buried in a lot of bureaucratic language, but they're there. And I hope they take that speech and turn it into an ad and buy television time on networks, and cut in some visuals, like reminding people, in a very primal way, what Secretary Kennedy is talking about. But those are the platform issues. It's freedom, right? It's freedom and self-determination. Do you want to be a slave, to some faceless entity that you never voted for, or do you want to be free? That's, if I were advising this administration, which I'm not, or HHS, which I'm not, I would say that's your message: slave or free. Lead with that. Don't bury the lead. So it's huge. The other thing that's exciting, and then I will speak about what the WHO will do next. The other reason it's exciting is that it's a joint release with the Secretary of State and the State Department, and that's as it should be. In fact, as I was listening, I was thinking, wow, I really hope the Secretary of State jumps in here, or, cuts his own video as well and releases that as well, because people in Europe, I was just in Europe are suffering. People in Britain are suffering. People in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they're suffering, and they're looking to the United States for leadership on this theme of freedom.
We've got to jump to break, but I want to hold you through to pick up not just where you left off, but also where you think directionally the WHO is going to go. We'll be right back, Posse, after this short break.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We're going to go to Mike Benz shortly, but Dr. Wolf, I want to let you pick up where I had to interrupt you. Just where you think the WHO's new strategy in terms of achieving their, I'll be euphemistic, quest for global domination in terms of public health emergencies, where exactly you think that strategy is going to take them throughout the tenure of the Trump administration.
Thank you. So I think President Trump has really, and HHS Secretary Kennedy have struck a real blow. Remember that in April, President Trump withdrew $400 million in funding. So I think that the WHO could be kind of reeling after this, but they will regroup and they will lock down, tighter on the rest of the world. So what I would say would be a good strategy to kind of kill off the WHO nonviolently is to have this be part, as well as free speech issues, part of an overt foreign policy strategy that's branded, and again, in the hands of the Secretary of State, and say, you know what, we're going to incentivize countries who give free speech to their citizens and roll back restrictive legislation. We're going to privilege countries that don't set in place the kind of lockdown framework that Ms. Bin Laden mentioned. I know they set up that framework in Britain as well. And we're going to have a freedom agenda throughout the world in which other countries that withdraw from the WHO and that overtly reject these totalitarian structures in medical freedom, but also in free speech, we're going to prioritize trading with them. We're going to prioritize diplomatic relations with them. We're going to reward them in all kinds of ways. I really think that would win a lot of support around the world. People are just waiting for the U.S. to have that kind of foreign policy, and it would really make sure that the WHO doesn't come back roaring from its corner like a wounded animal.
Dr. Wolf, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Before we have you back on, in the meantime, where can people go to follow you and stay up to date with everything you're working on?
Thanks so much. Please come to Substack. My Substack is Outspoken and over on Daily Clout. And of course, you can always order the Pfizer papers. And again, like Ms. Bin Laden said, thank you to you guys and the posse, because this was such a marginal issue, the WHO issue, until the posse and Steve Bannon and you and these individuals that she mentioned and others made it a priority that has now entered history. Thank you all.
The power of the posse, it is certainly unmatched. And you're a part of it too. You've done wonderful, really, I think, leading work on this issue. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll have you back on soon. Someone else who has done a lot of leading work, though, not to out you again, you were eating breakfast in the break. You seem to get up late. Steve and I always enjoy giving you a hard time for that. That's none other than Mike Benz. Now, Mike, it seems like you are in the crosshairs of MSNBC, so we'll help wake you up. Let's roll the clip and get your reaction.
This on that Wall Street Journal story, making this now a Trump versus the media thing. But on Steve Bannon's show, there was a fellow by the name of Mike Benz, who you might remember from a Brandy Zadrozny report unmasking his alt-right online persona. And he said, Trump made this a MAGA thing, and you can't un-MAGA it. And I thought that actually might be one of the best summaries I've heard so far of what the kind of core of the problem is here, which is that when you talk to the Trump advisors, especially privately, and I would say this even extends to the conservative news space, you ask them, okay, what's up with the focus on trans women in sports so much, the Epstein stuff? And, they'll say, look, like there's a gulf here between how much, especially in the Trump White House from the campaign, how much the staffing class cares about this kind of stuff versus the voters. And this is just such a top issue for them that I don't think you can let time, sweep it away.
The difference between the staffing class and the voters is the staffing class not that interested in Epstein, even though they were the ones whipping it all up for years and years. Cash Patel going on podcasts. Exactly. Dan Bongino going on podcasts.
And someone like a Bongino could be a true believer, and that's worth looking back at, like, was a key mistake here stacking the top levels of federal law enforcement.
Which is why maybe he's been silent for the past week.
Truthers, yeah. But no, I mean, it really is a dynamic that I think they've avoided running into this kind of a problem with a variety of other issues going back to the campaign. But so much of the decision making and how they choose to message things in the White House is based around the base.
Are they nervous about it?
Absolutely. And that's what I was reporting this week, that they will admit, at least on background and honestly, that this is very much a big deal. There's not a clear-cut solution to this. And the question is whether a resignation or a firing will do anything.
The worst person
Mike Benz,
just made a good point.
Jake LaHut, I actually know him. He's a good guy. Your thoughts? I will just say I love this sustained dialogue, trying to understand why the American people are so galvanized and intrigued by everything that happened with Epstein. It's I don't know. It's almost because it was a domestic and foreign intelligence operation involving pedophilia and blackmail. I think it sort of answers the question in its own right. But your thoughts to this sort of sustained dialogue?
No, it's like we're being visited by aliens from outer space, and they're here doing a cultural anthropology mission, trying to understand our language. They're like, the Magapeds. They seem to be concerned about child sex trafficking rings. We must tell the mothership. They're communicating in strange ways with each other. It's this is not really difficult to understand. This has been in the public ether for about a decade. February 2015, Trump stands at CPAC and says to Sean Hannity, February 2015, that's a year and a half before the 2016 election, which itself was a decade ago. And Trump says, Bill Clinton, nice guy. But I think he's got a little problem with a little guy named Jeffrey Epstein and his little island. And, you know, that was MAGA. That was MAGA for the 2016 election. That was MAGA for the 2020 election. That was MAGA for the 2024 election. Like, you trained us to go after this issue. We have been, like, grown in a lab. Chemicals have been mixed together specifically to breed this particular type of person in the MAGA movement who would care about Jeffrey Epstein's full excavation of all evidence around it. So, like, the idea that you would just snap that shut, you know, it's one thing where he says, listen, I've been consistent about Iran. I always said that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's always been MAGA, yada, yada. Okay, you don't even have that here. Like, you've consistently said, as well as all of your Spocks, that, you know, there would be, that exposures of this would cause problems for the wrong people. You know, I mean, there's like 20 people in the current cabinet in Trump White House that I think, you know, could get schmutz on him over this. So here we are.
Yeah, no, I think if the left-right has critical race theory where they look for how racism manifests in every situation, I think our equivalent of that is probably like critical deep state theory, right? Where we find the deep state, the sort of power apparatus, these unelected bureaucrats exerting their influence over a lot of issues through sort of a variety of means. I would argue that our theory is not just a theory, it's actually reified, it's real. But I want to link it to what I also wanted to talk to you about, which is the obviously bombshell, you know, Russia hoax. I saw treason was trending top on Twitter and political figures. You always love to see it. But your thoughts on what Tulsi declassified, because I think it just goes back to the sort of weird, you know, mentality that you saw those MSNBC geniuses sitting there. Oh, these people are so crazy. It's almost like they think there's a deep state. By the way, we're not going to cover the, you know, declassified memos that prove that there is. Your general assessment of everything going on there.
Yeah, I mean, are they still denying the deep state? Because I seem to remember like 100 headline supercut of them saying, thank God for the deep state. Can the deep state please save us already? Oh, no, don't fire them. They're deep state. They're good. So, I mean, look, the emails that came out yesterday, I think, confirm the biases of pretty much everybody. I mean, you know, we've been through the Russiagate thing for 10 years. Everybody knew, I think, from day one that it was BS. This is basically what Tulsi published yesterday is what we all suspected was there. And, you know, I can't say anything surprised me. But, yeah, it's you throw around a word like treason. Treason is a crime. If you're going to use that word, you got to. I mean, the problem is when federal officials use this language, it sort of trains the audience and the base to think that there will be Justice Department follow through with the crime that's alleged. So, you know, if you use a word like treason and you don't follow up with a prosecution of some kind, then either it wasn't treason or there's no justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that the DOJ is going to follow through on this is not something that is historically or empirically or even in real time accurate. And I think that that's sort of the fundamental disconnect where it seems like on the rhetoric, it's all guns blazing. And I think DNI is really representative more so of the, you know, stripe of accountability that we voted for. But I think you're exactly right. The 1-2 punch, you're missing the second part and arguably the more important part of that punch. I'm curious, though, your thoughts on the players involved in these meetings. There really seems to be a nexus between the Biden regime at the highest levels. You got, the Newlands, the Clappers, the Brennans, Lisa Monaco, John Kerry, even lower level State Department officials who are tied up at the Penn Biden Center. What you sort of make of that, personnel synergy and overlap involved in a lot of this?
Well, it makes total sense. So much of the Obama foreign policy side was Biden folks. I mean, if it was Biden was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for like 10 years. He had been on it for 40 years. He ran the Ukraine portfolio for Obama, which became the most important foreign affairs region on planet Earth after 2014 Crimea. So it doesn't surprise me that there was basically carryover from one to the other. But, yeah, I mean, John Brennan is just such a nasty figure of history. It boggles the mind, from him being the CIA station chief in Saudi Arabia and the run-up to 9/11 to him hacking Congress. I mean, John Brennan, his firm hacked Congress to spy on Congress, and he became CIA chief after that. I mean, this is like the people who met with Jeffrey Epstein after his first indictment. Like, John Brennan, his firm hacked the Senate, and then after he admitted it and said, whoopsie poopsie, I'm sorry about that, my bad, then they're like, oh, it's all good, dog. Why don't you run the Central Intelligence Agency? And then he goes on and he does, Russiagate. And then he spends the next 4 years on Twitter, basically calling for Trump to be a combination of, arrested, carjacked, pickpocketed, and worse. I mean, John Brennan's Twitter account. Do you remember this, Natalie? How many insane
How could I forget?
tweets this guy
that's
put out?
Required reading for the War Room Posse. We read that every day. Mike, if you could hang with us through the break, I think the audience wants to get your thoughts on the path forward. And frankly, I think this Russiagate declassification proves why we need not necessarily declass, but just transparency and a full release of all relevant Epstein materials. We'll be right back. More Mike Benz after this short break.
Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We've still got Mike Benz with us. Mike, I want to sort of connect the dots here with what's going on with the, domestic version of the deep state, everything with the Russia declassified documents, all the Epstein stuff, but also what's going on in Brazil. I know you've been at the forefront of a lot of the censorship fight there, obviously heating up because of the tariffs. Just yesterday, Bolsonaro, he had his house raided, his political headquarters raided. I think he has to wear an ankle monitor. He can't speak to essentially foreigners or foreign embassies, but I think interestingly, also banned from posting on social media. Talk about a buried lead. If you want to give us sort of an update on everything going on there and how it even links back to what we've seen go on here.
Yeah, you nailed it. And in response, now Moraes and the whole Brazilian Supreme Court effectively is persona non grata in the United States. Secretary Rubio at the State Department just revoked the visas, not just for them, but for their family, who are, I believe, they're members who are going to university here, working here. So basically, there's now a growing kind of Cold War between the U.S. and Brazilian rogue judiciary. Now that those judges are obviously the ones who are protecting Lula, there is kind of a not insignificant irony here in the sense that it was the Biden regime that basically bribed the Brazilian government to go after Bolsonaro, and the Trump admin that is passing these sanctions on them for doing what the previous U.S. government told them to do. But, in the midst of that kind of comedy of errors, there's obviously a very real human casualty in terms of the cost of this, which is the speech freedoms of 200 million Brazilians and just the absolutely terrible tragedy they're putting Bolsonaro through.
And Mike, just last question before we let you go. Yesterday on the show, we highlighted the new phrase non-cooperation, the idea that within a lot of these agencies, they're wanting to subvert President Trump almost in a more direct way. At least they're speaking about it. You got this sort of indivisible, no kings NGO apparatus pledging to train 1 million people, including federal government employees, in these tactics, which if you look at the etymology of it, a lot of it comes from these sort of old CIA pamphlets. One of them, I think, was called Simple Sabotage. I'm just curious your assessment of that sort of new strategy and how you think we'll see it be rolled out.
They keep confirming our biases. Why do they keep doing this? So, I mean, they're obviously trained to do this at State Department and USAID. This is what they exist for. Their job is to overthrow democratically elected governments, and now they're saying, wah, wah, boo-hoo, if you don't pay us, we're going to overthrow your government. It's like, okay, well, at this point, at least let them pay themselves or let them look for outside funding. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. But we shouldn't have to pay them to do it. And the other part of it is, what do you think would be done if Trump careers organize this thing inside of a Kamala Harris administration? Do you know how fast, some sort of criminal charges would be ginned up, like something nebulous, like conspiracy against rights? Or the fact is it's one thing if you are, non-cooperative. It's another thing if you try to do this civil disobedience, which is because what they try to do is they try to basically say don't follow the law, but don't follow the law in a way that doesn't kill people. But because they try to compare everything to the 1960s civil rights countertop protests, where they say, well, it was illegal, but it was a bad law, so we should break the law and we should apply that same thing to everything that Trump does, and we should just not follow the law because it's Trump's laws. And it's like, okay, well, if we did that under a Harris administration, we'd all be in jail for the rest of our lives. So I think that these sorts of things have to be monitored by law enforcement. If you're a federal government employee and you are going to not follow laws, you're going to intentionally sabotage the government you're working for. I think, that's the death knell if you have 1 million people inside your government doing that. So I think law enforcement and the Justice Department
Pam Bondi. I won't hold my breath on that one. Mike Benz, in the meantime, before we have you back on, we'll try to angle for the 5 p.m. show. Where can people go to follow you?
You can follow me on X at Mike Benz Cyber. Thanks, Natalie. I'm going to get some coffee now.
Thank you, sir, for joining us. There you go. Just woke up for you, the War Room Posse. Thank you. They appreciated it, as do I. And speaking of the War Room Posse, I think probably one of your equally large supporters and, frankly, beneficiaries is none other than Mike Lindell, who joins us now. Mike, take it away. Hit us with the latest all things MyPillow.
Yeah, I want to add a couple years ago, and we on our communication app, it's vocal.com, VOCL.com, and it's in Portuguese, everybody. So you can go there and get updates of what's going on right now. But in the meantime, at MyPillow, today is the last day for the Giza Dream Sheets, everybody. 98, any size, any color. They're going to be back to the $99.98 and $119.98. Right now, you can get the War Room Posse exclusive. Use promo code War Room, any size, any color. Go to the website to mypillow.com. Scroll down till you see Steve there. Click on Steve, and there they are. There's the Giza Dream Sheets. There is our blowout sale for our My Pillows and our crosses. Save 50%. The $9.98 pillow. If you buy $75 or more today, I'm going to give you $100 and some in free digital gifts. You guys will absolutely love them. Use that promo code War Room or call 800-873. Love them. Use that promo code War Room or call 800-873-1062. Heading to my call center right now, so you might get me on the phone. I'm going to go back to my roots and take some calls. Promo code War Room.
You should be careful, Mike. If you say that, all the left-wing journalists are going to try calling you so they can get a word in with you. You know they love talking to you. War Room Posse, thanks for hanging with me, Steve, Mike, Jack, Nor, Naomi, the whole team. Always an honor to fill in and host War Room. Does it give me PTSD to Steve being in prison? Yes, but look at both how far we've come, but also, I guess, how far we haven't come. I'm looking at you, Pam Bondi. You got to pick up your game. We'll see you back here Monday. It's Natalie Winters out. Thank you guys for yet another good show. Let's take us out with Steve's favorite song.